A UK court just ruled that a 15-year-old Jehovah's Witness must have a life-saving blood transfusion, despite her objections based on religious grounds. She has sickle cell syndrome, a condition where the blood cells that carry oxygen through your bloodstream are cut in half. It's actually an evolutionary adaptation to protect against certain diseases, but it means that the person is at higher risk for strokes, among other things. According to the judge, quote, "Although the teen is intelligent and able to make her own decisions, she must not be allowed to die." This is a pretty big deal. It might even be precedent-setting. According to the article found on metro.co.uk, the judge recommended the High Court examine whether the girl should have more say on treatments, including blood transfusions, before she turns 18. This is a step in the right direction. We have no way of knowing how many people don't make it out as a result of outrageous, outdated rules on blood transfusions. But it's not zero, and that means it's too many. QAnon has fallen silent after Election Day. Until now. For those of you who don't know, the QAnon cult is controlled by a poster who goes by Q Clearance Patriot, or just Q for short. He's posted multiple times per day on a website called qposts.online, up until November 3rd. His last few posts were on the days leading up to the election. On October 31st, he said, "Are you ready to finish what we started? Nothing can stop what's coming" is not just a catchphrase. Q. Are you ready to hold the political elite accountable? Q. Are you ready to take back control of this country? Q. Then, on election morning, he said that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. Abraham Lincoln, November 1863. Together we win. Q. Then, complete radio silence. Finally, November 12th and 13th, he sent a flurry of posts. November 12th, 9 a.m. Nothing can stop what's coming. Nothing. Q. Same day, an hour later. Shall we play a game? Nothing can stop what's coming. NCSWIC. Then a couple links to CISA.gov. Then he said, "Who stepped down today? Forced. More coming? Why is this relevant? How do you show the public the truth? How do you safeguard U.S. elections post-POTUS? How do you remove foreign interference and corruption and install U.S.-owned voter ID laws and other safeguards? It had to be this way. Sometimes you must walk through the darkness before you see the light." Then, finally, a single word on November 13th at 12:20 in the morning. Durham. Q. So is Q acknowledging the Biden victory with this? How do you safeguard U.S. elections post-POTUS? It had to be this way? What are they trying to imply with this post? Are they saying that Biden won, or are they trying to rev people up in preparation for something bad? Hard to tell. We're just going to have to sit back and watch QAnon's reactions. Pastor John Bernstein has been making big waves lately. Not long ago, he got banned from Patreon, YouTube, and basically everywhere else for encouraging some disturbing stuff in Trump's name. He used to have around 150,000 followers across different platforms, but since then, he set up his own website and hosts his shows himself. Last I heard, he said he was putting his website behind a paywall. It costs at least $1 per month to gain access to everything. Basically his own Patreon system. But that's not why we're talking about him. In a recent podcast episode, he urged Trump to take, quote-unquote, drastic action to stop Democrats from supposedly stealing the election. Here's what he said.
I think we need drastic, and I mean drastic measures in order to change what's going on. The first thing I would do if I was President Trump is I would call the Insurrection Act in immediately, right now.
Right on, rah.
The first thing you do is you quell all violence and you stop all violence with the military or the National Guard. The second thing you do is you declare martial law in the country right now, and you send in armed military and National Guard folks into every single one of these swing states where they are counting ballots, and you force them to stop counting ballots right then and there, and if not, they are taken away by the military and arrested.
This coming from the crowd that believed for 8 straight years that Obama was going to declare martial law and refuse to leave office. This is the strangest, most bizarre shit I have ever seen. It's like they're pro-freedom and democracy as long as it goes their way. The moment they think they can seize power, they're against freedom and democracy. They have no concept of forbearance. You want to limit what the president is allowed to do. You want to limit what Congress is allowed to do. Sure, it might help you right now, but what about the next Congress or president? They might not be on your side. and they're going to have the exact same power. Well, there's a simple solution to this problem. Just don't ever let your enemy take power, right? Why didn't we think of this before? Of course we're okay with the president jailing political opponents. Of course we're okay with censoring free speech. Doesn't bother them at all. We just have to make sure they stay in power so it doesn't happen to our side. Is this disturbing to anybody else? You might remember Pastor Robert Jeffress from some of my clips. I've been talking about him for a long time. He's a famous megachurch pastor, and another representative for the evangelical voting bloc. Ultra homophobic, ultra hateful person, and as such, is a perfect representative for evangelicals. He even got in trouble a while back for outright endorsing a political candidate, which is unconstitutional. As a 501 charity organization, i.e. a church, he's not allowed to endorse one political candidate over another. He endorsed Mike Pence for a 2024 run after Trump won re-election in 2020. Obviously, that didn't happen, and I doubt the first bit will either. But Jeffress surprised me the other day by writing an op-ed on Fox News' website. Here's what he said. Quote, "It appears that former Vice President Joe Biden will become the 46th President of the United States on January 20th, unless President Trump succeeds in legal challenges to the counting of votes in several states. For millions of Christians across our nation, this is a bitter pill to swallow. Here is our chance to show that Christians are not hypocrites." End quote. Well, I just want to point out the fact that evangelical voters are hypocrites. They talk about how sacred marriage is while voting for a dude who's been through multiple affairs and divorces. They talk about how it's easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. But then they vote for Trump and donate everything they have to people like Robert Jeffress. But I digress. Let's continue reading. Quote, "We serve a God who remains on his throne, sovereignty reigning over every square inch of his vast universe. We serve a God who loves us and will never leave or forsake us. And now we have the chance to show the consistency and constancy of our Christian witness to this world. When Joe Biden becomes president, we should commend him for the things he does right. We should condemn him for the things he does wrong. And above all, we must pray fervently for our president. If President Biden succeeds, we all succeed. May God bless Joe Biden, and may God bless the United States of America." End quote. That's fascinating. I actually said the same thing when Trump got elected. His success means our success. We have a giant orangutan in the cockpit right now. Nobody wants to see the plane go down because that means we're all fucked. We want the orangutan to land it safely. High chances? No. But his success is our success. So while praying isn't going to do a goddamn thing for us, we can at least root for him and scold him when he fucks up. Turns out his time in the cockpit was basically one fuck up after another. So there was very little rooting going on. Either way, I'm glad to see some evangelical pastors getting behind Joe Biden. And I'm glad to see world leaders recognizing him as president-elect. Because the less legitimacy people give to the big orange orangutan in the cockpit, the easier the transition from him to a real pilot is going to be. Anybody remember Pastor Tony Spell? He's the guy who tried to run over the protester with the bus. The pastor who said he wouldn't stop super-spreading church services, even if it meant his entire congregation was wiped out by the pandemic. He was court-ordered to hold his services online instead of in person, and he refused, so he was put on house arrest. And once again, he held church services anyways. He kept appealing, until he had no options left. Finally, the lockdown lifted in his state, so it didn't matter anymore. People like this should be jailed for their crimes. Seriously. How many people did his congregation get sick? Anyways, he just lost a lawsuit against the Louisiana governor's pandemic restrictions. Here's a quote from U.S. District Judge Brian Jackson. "Governor Edwards' proclamations have always treated comparable secular institutions similarly to comparable religious institutions. In the earliest days of the pandemic, the only business or individuals who were treated more leniently than religious organizations were essential workers and businesses, such as healthcare workers and grocery stores. With every restriction on places of worship, identical or more stringent restrictions have been placed on similarly situated secular businesses. Indeed, religious organizations have often been privileged over similar secular businesses." End quote. I'm actually surprised by this. A judge in Louisiana, of all places, sides with safety rather than churches. Good for him. Is this going to stop Tony Spell from taking part in super spreader events? Of course not. According to Hemant Mehta on the Friendly Atheist website, Louisiana isn't even as restrictive as it should be. Quote, "Rather than prohibiting gatherings of 10 or more people or anything like that, the current order allows churches to be filled to 75% of their capacity." So at this point, the dude's just bitching for the sake of bitching. He wants to infect as many people as possible. There is no other explanation for it at this point.